Should you show people what you're building or keep it private until it's perfect? The answer depends on what you're building with, and most people get this wrong. Over the past few episodes, we've been exploring this idea that trust in business is built like a structure, brick by brick, layer by layer. Last episode was about the materials, what you're building with. Before that, the foundation, what you're building on. Today, we're talking about whether you should let people watch you build or whether you should hide it until it's done. Think about an indie coffee shop under construction. Sometimes they'll put up temporary walls, banners covering the windows, coming soon, and you have no idea what's happening inside. It could be amazing, or it could be a disaster. You'll find out when they're ready to show you. Other times, they leave everything wide open. Windows uncovered, door propped open, and you can watch the whole build-out happen in real time. You can see the materials going in and watch the crew work, and you can notice when they make adjustments. Now, this isn't just about brick-and-mortar businesses or cafes. This principle applies whether you're running a SaaS platform, a consulting firm, an agency, a product company, or whatever. The question is the same. Do you show your work, or do you keep it private until launch? Both approaches can build trust, because the question isn't just about the business you're building. It's also about who you are as a person. Are you naturally open and inviting, or are you more reserved and professional? Now, both are valid, but here's what matters. Your business image needs to match your actual personality, because at the end of the day, people are working with a person, not just a company. And if there's a disconnect between how you present and who you actually are, they'll feel it, and trust breaks down. I'm Jason Hager, and this is Grayleaf Media. Today, when to build in public, when to build in private, and how to know the difference. Let's start with why building in public works. Because when it works really well. When you let people watch you lay brick number 1, then brick 2, then brick 3, by the time you get to brick 50, they've watched the entire structure go up. They don't need to inspect it as carefully because they saw you build it. You've compressed what would normally take years of trust building into months, maybe even weeks. Transparency works because people trust what they can see. When you show your process, like how you make decisions or what you're learning, the problems you're solving, your audience becomes invested in your success. They're not just customers, they're witnesses, and witnesses become advocates. This is especially powerful for mission-driven businesses, because if your mission is genuine, transparency proves it. You're not hiding profit margins or questionable practices. Your values aren't marketing copy. They're visible in your decisions. This is your competitive advantage over corporations with PR departments managing every message. Think about Buffer. They publish their revenue dashboard publicly. Anyone, I don't care who you are, you can see how much money they're making, how many customers they have, what their growth trajectory looks like. That's radical transparency, and it works for them because their business model is solid. The numbers prove their system works. Or indie makers on social media. They're building their products in public. They're sharing their revenue, their struggles, their learning process. For them, building in public is part of the product. The transparency creates community, and the community becomes customers. Or restaurants with open kitchens. You can see your food being made. You can watch the quality happening in real time. That visibility accelerates trust faster than any amount of marketing ever could. But here's the catch, and this is critical. This only works if what you're building is actually solid. If your foundation is weak, or your materials don't match your promise, transparency just reveals that faster. Which brings us to the shadow side. not all transparency serves trust. Sometimes what looks like transparency is actually something else. There's a difference between building in public and performing vulnerability. I see this a lot. People sharing behind-the-scene content that's just another kind of facade. Carefully curated vulnerability, like, look how real I'm being. But it's staged. It's transparency as a marketing tactic rather than genuine openness. And then there's oversharing, which is different from transparency. Transparency is showing your process. Oversharing is dumping your problems. Your audience didn't sign up to be your therapist. Some struggles are meant for private conversations and not public stages. And when you cross that line, you create discomfort instead of connection. Here's the critical distinction, and this is where most people mess this up. Vulnerability says, this is hard. Here's what we're doing about it. Now that invites trust because you're showing you're human while maintaining competence. Victimhood says, this is hard. Feel sorry for me. That demands rescue. One shows you can handle challenges. The other undermines confidence entirely. When transparency backfires, it's usually because of a mismatch. If you're building with cheap bricks but marketing them as premium, transparency exposes that immediately. Everyone can see the quality doesn't match the promise. If your mortar is weak, like inconsistent communication or broken promises or a lack of a follow-through, you're showing people your work just reveals the instability. This is why some businesses need privacy. Not because they're hiding something shady, but because what they're building isn't ready to be seen yet. The structure isn't stable enough to put weight on. And showing people an unstable structure doesn't build trust. It destroys it. Sometimes, privacy isn't hiding. It's wisdom. You're protecting something that needs more time before it's ready to be visible. So how do you decide what to share and what to keep private? This is where people want a checklist, but it doesn't work that way because it depends entirely on what you are building, what stage you're at, and who you are as a person. Here's how to think about it. Share the process, but protect the details. You can talk about how you make decisions without sharing every internal debate. You can discuss what you're learning without narrating every mistake in real time. You can be honest about challenges without making your audience carry the weight of solving them. The difference is this. Are you showing your work, or are you asking for rescue? Think back to the last episode about materials. If you are using premium bricks, such as handcrafted products, white glove service, or deep customization, then showing the craftsmanship accelerates trust. People see why it costs more, why it takes longer. The transparency justifies the premium. But if you're using standard bricks and pretending they're premium, transparency destroys that illusion immediately. Everyone can see the mismatch. And if you're using cheap bricks strategically, you're testing, you're iterating, you're figuring things out, then being honest about that is actually kind of endearing. This is MVP. We're learning as we go. Well, that transparency builds a different kind of trust. People respect the honesty, and they're often willing to come along for the ride. The foundation matters too. Remember episode 3? If your foundation is solid, your values are clear, your why is genuine, your decisions align with what you say that you stand for, then transparency proves it. Your values aren't just words on a website. They're visible in action. But if your foundation is shaky, if you're still figuring out what you stand for, transparency just reveals that uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't build trust. The question becomes, Am I sharing this to serve my audience or to serve myself? If I'm sharing to educate, inspire, or prove my integrity, that's strategic. If I'm sharing to get validation, to be rescued, or to perform vulnerability, well, that's not helping anyone, is it? But there's another variable we haven't talked about yet, and it's maybe the most important one. Who are you as a person? Some people are naturally open books. They're comfortable sharing their process, their struggles, and their learning in real time. That's their personality, and if their business reflects that, it feels authentic. It feels like them. Other people are more private and more reserved. They may need time to process before they share. They prefer to show finished work rather than messy progress. And that's not wrong. That's just who they are. And if their business reflects that, it also feels authentic. The problem occurs when there's a mismatch. When you're naturally reserved but forcing yourself to build in public because someone told you that's what works. Or when you're naturally open but hiding everything because you think that's more professional. The disconnect is what kills trust. People can feel when you're not being yourself. And when they feel that disconnect, they stop trusting you. So let's talk about when privacy builds more trust. Here's the paradox. Sometimes keeping something private actually builds more trust than sharing it. And that sounds counterintuitive until you realize what boundaries signal. When you have clear boundaries about what you share and what you don't, you're signaling competence. You know what matters and what doesn't. You're signaling respect. You're not using your audience as therapists. You're signaling professionalism. You have internal processes that work. And you're signaling maturity. You don't need validation for every decision. The oversharers destroy trust because when everything is public, nothing is stable. If you're narrating every internal debate, every pivot, every moment of doubt, people start to wonder if you actually know what you're doing. There's a difference between being transparent and being chaotic. Transparency with boundaries looks confident. Transparency without boundaries looks unstable. This doesn't mean hiding, though. You can still be honest about challenges without narrating every detail. You can still be transparent about your values without performing vulnerability. You can still show your work without showing everything. The balance is this: transparent enough that people see your integrity, boundaried enough that people trust your judgment, vulnerable enough that people connect with your humanity, and professional enough that people trust your competence. Don't miss this. Your team needs privacy too. They need safety to think out loud, to debate ideas, to make mistakes without the whole world watching. If you're broadcasting every internal conversation, you're not building in public. You're creating a fishbowl. And nobody does their best work in a fishbowl. Some things should stay internal, not because they're shameful, but because they need room to breathe before they're ready to be public. Now let's talk about how to decide. How do you actually decide what to share and what to keep private? It comes down to three things. 1. What you're building. 2. What you're building it with. And 3. Who you are as a person. Every time you're about to share something, whether it's a post, a video, or behind-the-scenes look, ask yourself, does this strengthen or weaken my foundation? Do my materials match what I'm showing? Does this feel like me, or am I performing someone else's version of transparency? Some people aren't ready to build in public yet. Maybe they're still figuring things out. Maybe they're private by nature, or maybe they need more bricks laid before they're comfortable showing their work. And that's okay. Privacy isn't hiding if it's honest about what it is. And some people are already open books. They share naturally. They process out loud. They invite people into the mess. And that's okay too. Transparency isn't oversharing if it serves the audience and reflects who you actually are. The test is really quite simple. Would I want to work with someone who shares this way? If you're naturally verbose and caring and love hearing people's stories, and that's genuinely who you are, then your business should reflect that. If you're more reserved and thoughtful and prefer to present finished work, and that's genuinely who you are, then your business should reflect that. The principle isn't build in public or build in private. The principle is this: be consistent with who you actually are, because people are working with you, not just your business. Let me give you a framework for this. Whether you build in public or private comes down to 3 things. 1. What's your foundation? If your foundation is solid, your values are clear, your why is genuine, your decisions align with what you say you stand for, well, transparency proves it. But if your foundation is still shaky or you're still building it, transparency just reveals the instability. What are your materials? If you're using premium bricks and your craftsmanship is real, showing your work accelerates trust. If you're using cheap bricks strategically and you're honest about it, that can work too. But if your materials don't match your promise, transparency exposes the gap immediately. Question 3. Who are you? If you're naturally open and process out loud and build in public, it's authentic. If you're more reserved and prefer to present finished work, build in private. That's also authentic. The disconnect is what kills trust. The principle isn't complicated. Build in public when transparency proves your foundation. Build in private when boundaries demonstrate competence. Well, both work. The context determines the choice. So here's what to ask yourself. What am I building that should be visible? What am I sharing that doesn't actually serve anyone? Where am I hiding because I'm afraid versus protecting because it's strategic? And honestly, am I being consistent? Do my actions match what I say I believe about how businesses should work? Because your customers are watching, your team is watching. The real question is, does showing my work serve what I'm building, or does it just serve my ego? I'm Jason Hager, and this is Grayleaf Media, the podcast for leaders who believe profit and purpose don't have to be at odds. If this resonated with you, connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Jason Hager or Grayleaf Media. Next week, The Blueprint. Why some businesses look beautiful but don't function, and the difference between building with intention versus just stacking bricks. Until then, keep building and be consistent.